Understanding how your cookware behaves and properly preheats is very critical. As a new cook and a beginner, you may find this really difficult. In this video, I'm going to go over several different quantifiable methods that are going to help you understand your cookware and when to add your cooking oil. These methods are going to help you lock down the fundamentals, which is going to give you great cooking results and make the entire process in the kitchen a lot more enjoyable. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or an expert. Let's dive in. Okay, so proper temperature control. It's an important thing to master. As a beginner, as a new cook, or even an experienced cook, you need to understand and get to know your pans. Now, this video is going to focus primarily on preheating your pan and your oil so you can get better results. So what does preheating your pan correctly do for you? Well, when you preheat your pan correctly and the oil that you're going to use, it's going to help you sear your proteins a lot better. It's going to help you release your proteins so they don't stick to the pan and peel off as you're trying to flip them. And that's going to result in a better non-stick pan and overall a much better cooking experience. You're going to have a smaller mess to deal with at the end of your cook, so cleanup's going to be a lot easier. You're going to get great results. You're going to get the sear that you're looking for, and you're just going to enjoy cooking. So this video is going to help you visualize that, help you learn how to use your pans. And the only way that you can do that, especially as a beginner, is to see visual results so you can understand what's going on, kind of memorize what's going on, and get to know your pan a little bit better so it becomes second nature. Because when you're first starting off as a cook, it's not something that's obvious right away, especially if you're using many different types of pans. And if you master preheating your pans correctly and the oil that you're going to use, you're on your way. But I'm going to be focusing on my favorites. I know that they're going to work on cast iron, carbon steel, or stainless steel. Some of these methods are actually designed for a certain pan. Like, for example, it might be a method that people really like to use for carbon steel or cast iron, and there might be another method that originated for stainless steel. Just keep in mind that this is a visual reference. It's to help you get to know your pans. Once you kind of get to know them a little bit better and you use them and you practice with them more and more, eventually you'll be using these visual and tactile methods less and less, and it's going to be second nature to you until you buy another type of pan. So what are the visual ways of learning properly how to preheat your pan? There's a couple, but I'm going to focus on the ones that worked for me, especially when I started off cooking as a new cook. And these are the same methods that I've recommended to family and friends, and they had great results. They used these methods initially, and then once they got to know the pan that they're using, they were good, they were golden, and they were able to take off. So here's the methods that I recommend. The first method is called the bread method, or the Wonder Bread method, or the white bread method. It's called many different things, but you use bread as a visual indicator to figure out the heat distribution of your pan and if it's properly preheating evenly. So the bread method is a good one. The next one is a really popular method, especially with stainless steel, and it's called the Leidenfrost Effect. I did a short video on this where I kind of went over what the Leidenfrost effect is. It's also called the mercury ball test. They're both kind of interchangeable, but it's a great method to figure out if your pan's too cold or not. Another really cheap and popular method is the timer method, and it's exactly what it sounds like it is. You grab a stopwatch and you time the amount of time it takes to preheat your pan. The next method is the feel method, or your sensory method. And it literally involves taking your palm, or even better, the back of your hand, and hovering it over your pan to get a feel on whether or not it's properly preheated. And the final method involves a heat gun. Buying a heat gun and using that to properly measure the temperature of your pan. So I tried to keep the list very versatile and open, whether you're a beginner or an expert. I wanted to give you different methods that you can use as you graduate to the next level of your cooking journey. Each method has its pros and cons. So we're going to go over the details of each method right now. Okay, so the first method is the bread method. Grab your favorite pan, make sure you start off with a cold pan and no cooking oil. And then you're gonna cut up a couple pieces of bread, stick the bread in the pan, and allow the entire thing to heat up together. After a few minutes or so, Check on the progress, flip over the pieces of bread, and you should see even heat distribution. If you noticed any pale spots on the bread, that's basically telling you that there wasn't enough heat distribution in that particular area. The bread method is a really visual tool, and I really like it because it's basically telling you two important things. The first thing that it's telling you is how well your heat source or your stovetop is working, and how well it's working with that particular pan. So for example, you may have a gas, electric, or induction stovetop, or both, or all three. And it's going to tell you how well each pan plays with that stovetop. The next thing that it's telling you is how well your pan in particular is doing. Now, it takes some investigation from you to figure out if it's your stovetop or your pan that's the problem. But you can see here that it's incredibly visual. My all-clad 3-ply stainless steel pan didn't perform as well as the carbon steel and the cast iron, which was kind of surprising. Now, when I flipped the bread over one more time with the stainless steel, just to double check, I got similar results. It didn't really have an even heat distribution. So I have a bit of investigating to do. Now, the pros and cons of this method are it's incredibly visual. If you're a visual person, you're going to love it. The cons are you don't get as much information as you would like. If there is a problem, you have to investigate if it's the pan or the stove. The next method is the Leidenfrost Effect. The Leidenfrost Effect is incredibly popular with stainless steel users. If you don't know what the Leidenfrost Effect is, I've actually done a short 1-minute video explaining the overview of the entire process. The Leidenfrost Effect is a great way to determine if your pan is still too cold and not yet properly preheated. Basically, you're going to grab some water droplets and you're going to start adding them to the pan. As soon as you start seeing the water droplets forming and hovering around the pan, you know you're properly preheated, which is usually around 200 degrees Celsius or 392 degrees Fahrenheit. The Leidenfrost Effect does a really good job of letting you know when your pan's too cold, but not so much when your pan's too hot. You will get more of a violent reaction like this, but you don't know by how much. And likewise, it doesn't really work on other types of pans. So for example, on my cast iron or carbon steel pan, the Leidenfrost Effect doesn't work. So this particular method is really reserved more for stainless steel users. The next method is the thermal gun method, and it does require a small investment from you. I actually really like this particular model that I have here. If you guys are interested, I will put an Amazon link below so you guys can purchase it for yourself. The manufacturer does include an emissivity table, so you can use this for practically anything. And I actually do use it for a lot of things around the house, not just for cooking. Emissivity is defined as the ratio of energy that's being radiated from a material surface. So if you want to get the thermal measurement of different cooking surfaces, for example, a more reflective surface like stainless steel, or a darker surface like carbon steel or cast iron, having the ability to adjust the emissivity really gives you that flexibility. And I actually use this thermal gun all around my house, not just for cooking, so I really do feel like I got my money's worth. And I think the build quality and the accuracy is fantastic. There's a lot of different benefits to having a thermal gun, but for example, you can get really precise when you're preheating your pan in respect to the smoking point of your cooking oil. To show you just how valuable a thermal gun really is, I took sunflower seed oil, which has a smoking point of 450 degrees, and I put it in my preheated carbon steel skillet. I took a few readings when preheating the pan, and then I poured in some oil and waited for it to start smoking, to start going above its smoking point. And then I took another reading, and you can see here that we are just above the smoking point of sunflower seed oil, 450 degrees. So then I allowed everything to smoke a bit more, took another reading, and you can see that we're way over the smoking point. So having a thermal gun is incredibly valuable. There is a bit of a caveat though. You should have an adjustable thermal gun so you can properly change the emissivity. You can see here that I'm trying to get a reading off of my stainless steel skillet, which is incredibly reflective. And that's actually the biggest cons to thermal guns. When it comes time to measure reflective surfaces, they do require a lot of adjustment. You have to adjust the gun when you're preheating the pan without oil, and then again adjust it when you do add the oil, or else you're going to get a false reading and they won't be very accurate. So in general, if you are a stainless steel user, buy an adjustable gun and be prepared to adjust it pretty frequently. So what about some simpler methods? Well, you do have the timer method, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You basically time how long it takes for your pan to properly preheat. One of the biggest cons to the timer method is if you have different types of pans, you basically need to keep a log of the different profiles until you get familiar with your cookware. And finally, the last method that I have for you guys is the feel method, which is used by beginners and experts all over the world. The only problem is it's incredibly subjective to you and to everyone else. So it's something that you want to use once you've gotten familiar with your pans as a quick reference. I actually use this method all the time, but it's something that I had to learn as I got more experienced. I like to compare it to feeling a steak for doneness. It's just something that you learn as you get more experienced. So what about oil? When should you add your oil, and how do you know if your oil is properly preheated? Oil is a lot simpler in my opinion than just, putting a pan on top of your stovetop and waiting for it to properly preheat. You can't really see anything visually right away with a pan that has nothing in it, unless it really starts smoking or it's glowing, red hot or something, but you shouldn't get to that stage. Now, something that's really important that I need to mention that you need to know about is smoking point. If you don't know what smoking point is or the smoking point of the particular oil that you're using, don't worry, I got your back. I have a video about cooking oils, and I go over all the pros and cons, smoking point, and health benefits or not so great benefits of each cooking oil. So if you haven't watched that video, I'll link it here, go watch it. And I go into a really detailed explanation of the most popular cooking oils like olive oil, avocado oil, sunflower seed oil, grapeseed oil. But generally speaking, once you've identified the oil that you want to use for the application that you want to use it for, like if you're searing, you want to preheat your pan like we talked about previously, you add your oil in there and you should see your oil slightly shimmering. You may need to tilt your head or look at it at a different angle, but you should see that. It's a very obvious thing. Kind of looks like a ripple effect. Once you see that, you'll know that your oil is ready. Another indication that you can use that's really popular is watching for just when the oil starts to smoke. And I'm talking about something that's really faint. It's literally just starting to smoke. It's something that you have to catch and you have to be watching really carefully. I see a lot of cooks trying to get like eye level with the pan to see if it's just about to smoke, or they even grab a piece of paper and put it behind the pan, avoiding the flames. Don't catch your kitchen on fire. But they'll try to see if the oil is just about to smoke. Now, if you properly preheated your pan, and then you add your oil, it's gonna be golden. You should have everything in sync. The oil should start shimmering or smoking, lightly smoking, relatively quickly, but making sure that your oil is properly preheated before adding your proteins, before adding your food. It's a really, really important step along with preheating your pan. And like I said, I can't cover all of the basics of oil right now, but choosing the correct type of oil for the application is equally as important. Okay, so what are my final thoughts and my final piece of advice? Well, as you guys saw with each different method, every single method has its pros and cons. There's not a single method that I can personally say is the tried and true best method, the one and done method, and you're gonna be a great cook overnight. I don't think there's any expectation from that. I think everyone that's watching this video that's serious about cooking knows that it takes time. But every single method will get you to that next step. For example, if you just bought a pan, you're learning everything you could learn about that pan and you want to get better at it, using the bread method will tell you a lot about that pan. It's also going to tell you a lot about your stovetop and the stove that you're using. Really, the bread method is there to help you understand heat distribution and whether or not your pan or your stove is giving you that even heat distribution. Is your pan cooking everything evenly or not? The Leidenfrost effect is a very popular method. It's a very scientific method, yay science. But what the Leidenfrost effect is really telling you is whether or not your pan is too cold. That's really what it's primarily telling you. Yes, it can give you a visual indication if your pan's too hot, but it's not going to give you much information about that. It's really going to say, hey, your pan's too cold, you're not getting the Leidenfrost effect quite yet, or hey, your pan's way too hot, now the water's violently, splashing everywhere. It's beating up, but it's splashing everywhere. The pan is too hot in respect to the Leidenfrost effect. The timer method is also very scientific, but there's too many variables. It all depends on what kind of pan you're using. Are you consistently using the same pan? Your stovetop, let's say you're switching up on your stovetops. Let's say you're primarily using gas in the kitchen, but you have an induction portable stove that you use outside. Well, now things are different, right? Or an electric stove and so forth. Maybe you're grabbing your stainless steel pan, or maybe you're grabbing a carbon steel pan. The timer method requires some due diligence from you and for you to do your homework. You'll have to test every single pan in every different scenario and then keep like a log, right? Like my carbon steel can be properly preheated on my gas stovetop in 5 minutes, or my stainless steel can be properly preheated on my induction stovetop in 2.5 minutes. The numbers obviously are going to be different, but you get the point. You'd have to keep a log and remember that until you kind of get the feel for things. I think if you just have one pan and one stovetop, the timer method's a great method. Okay, now what about using your sensors, using your hand, feeling the temperature, feeling the heat over your pan? It's a good method. It's used by experts all the time, but I think it's more of a, hey, you've already kind of gotten to know your pan a bit and you kind of know what to expect. The feel method can be very useful. Keep in mind, it's all subjective. And it's also really based on how you feel that day. I mean, you could wake up and be a little bit sick and be very sensitive to everything, or it could be really hot out or really cold. And then finally, the last method, the heat gun method, requires a small purchase from you. It's a very small purchase, 20, 30 bucks or so. But I think it's a very reliable method. You just check the temperature of your pan. Every single time you can check the temperature of your pan, any pan on any stovetop, and it's going to tell you whether or not you've properly preheated your pan, and you can also check for proper distribution. So the heat gun method is an instrument, a very valuable instrument that can give you data, and you can choose to do whatever you want with that data. I really like the heat gun method, and I use it for my car, I use it for all kinds of things, not just for the kitchen. So you don't have to get the exact one that I have, but if you do like it, I'll link it in the video below. It works great, and I highly recommend it. So for me personally, if I could only choose one method, which method would I use that I know will work every single time? It would be the heat gun method. Second place for me, when it comes to heat distribution and figuring out what your pan is doing, the bread method is just really cool, right? Cut up some bread slices, Wonder Bread, and just put it on there, and you can see exactly how your pan is behaving. I mean, that's pretty cool. Lastly, I really do like the Leidenfrost Effect. It's a really great tool, especially for stainless steel pans, to figure out if your pan's too cold. But again, every method works really well. I think they're all very valuable. It really depends on you and what you're trying to do. But I feel like you definitely have some tools to choose from to give you that visual indication and help you better understand your pan. So take the time to get to know your pans, and I promise you, they'll stop being cold with you. You guys will collaborate and work together to make amazing meals. That's it for me, guys. I hope you found this video informative. Check out some of my other videos, and I will catch you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Hey, everybody. How'd you guys like that last video? Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified on my next video. And if you can, please share with your family and friends. I would really appreciate it. Here's some more content that I think you guys are really gonna enjoy. Check them out. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Take care.